The Kansas City Royals still haven't been swept in 2024, and part of it is because they've earned their name, the Comeback Kids. We'll talk next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can check us out wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and our show, well, I am based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some hosting, co-hosting, and some producing as well. But when you come to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball, whether they play like they did last night or they play like they did today, which, of course, feels a hell of a lot better than it did last night when we had our early hour episode going into the wee hours of Thursday morning. But, you know, sometimes it's the way it has to be here when you're doing episodes pretty much every day. But questions and comments on these episodes can always be left to me on Twitter or on our YouTube channel. Before we talk about the Comeback Kids, as we can probably start to call them now, want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Tax Network. We'll have a little bit on them coming up in about 15 to 20 minutes or so. They're one of our newer sponsors here and very proud to have them, and they are our title sponsor today. Well, today was quite a flow of emotions, if you will, in Game 4 of this series between the New York Yankees and the Kansas City Royals. I was at 2 of these games, both of them being losses, and I would have loved to be out there today, even though it is 100,000 degrees here in Kansas City, because you were treated to quite a ball game. But if you're being honest, you probably thought in the 9th inning with 2 outs, you were going to drive home in a very bad mood. And today's episode would have maybe been annoying to you, or you would have been hoping for me to rant about the team and they'd finally been swept and blown another game, the bullpen, this and that, and this and that. And we'll talk about the bullpen in tonight's episode. But we got to start it off with what this team is becoming and how you can tell in baseball, you always can tell when it is your year. And I love to use that quote that Denny Matthews had back in 2014 against the Minnesota Twins when Alex Gordon walked him off. It was off of Glenn Perkins, I believe it was. And we had a podcast episode dedicated to that in the Seattle series when they were in Seattle. But we've seen this now a handful of times, whether it's the 6th inning, 7th inning, 8th inning, 9th inning. They are the Comeback Kids, and they are maybe doing it on a larger scale than we can even remember back in 14 and 15. Like some of these leads they are erasing or coming close to erasing are just unfathomable. In today's game, it's not like the 1-run deficit was completely, a long shot, or it was out of question for the Royals to walk off that game. But they had 2 outs and 1 guy on. It was on first base, and it was MJ Melendez. And your 9-hole hitters coming to the plate against a closer that doesn't give up many runs. And at that point in time, the Royals had a 91.7% chance of losing. Kyle Isbel goes down 0-2. That percentage goes up a little bit. He works the count to 3-2. Then he singles into center field. And then Maikel Garcia, despite his cold stretch, rips a 2-run double down the line. Kauffman Stadium turns into pandemonium, chaos, whatever you want to call it. And the Royals avoid another sweep or a potential sweep in the last couple of weeks. They did it first to the Padres, had that 3-run ninth to come back from a 3-1 deficit. And today, after blowing a 2-0 lead, after Alec Marsh was as good as he's ever looked, and that was one of the most impressive starts we had seen from a Royals pitcher this year. The type of pressure he had to go out there and throw 6 no-hit innings, give up 1 hit, and it was to Juan Soto, 7 shutout, less than 100 pitches, and you leave with a 2-0 lead. 9 times out of 10, you should walk away with the W there. But I know he doesn't care about that. He cares about how well he pitched, to be that bulldog. And man, don't you just want to go to war with Alec Marsh? I mean, the type of guy that he's become, and we've known now about Alec Marsh and his toughness. I was at the game in the clubhouse when he got hit by the line drive on his forearm. And I asked him, was it painful? Or obviously knowing it was going to be painful, but did you feel it? When you were trying to make that play, he still picked up the ball and threw it to first. He's like, no, I didn't feel it. And I should have asked the follow-up of, well, did you check on the ball? Was the ball okay? Because that's just the mentality Alec Marsh rolls with. He's a Bulldog, and today he was an absolute Bulldog. Struck out Aaron Judge 3 times, struck out Juan Soto. Man, I mean, just absolutely masterful. And yeah, the bullpen blew that game, and I would actually say the defense contributed to that. Garrett Hampson and Vinny Pasquantino botching a play that led to a couple more runs and the Yankees taking the lead. But it's almost this feeling you get that anytime they're trailing late, you think they're going to at least have some form of an opportunity. They may not always cash in on it, but they are going to have a damn good chance of either tying or winning that game, even if it's their final out, right? If it feels like it's completely improbable at that point for them to walk off that game, they're going to find a way to do it. Trailing against Seattle by 2 runs, and they played 3 to win that game. I mean, these last couple of weeks have been hair on fire type of baseball. They haven't played great baseball, but don't you just feel better now? Leaving this series, just salvaging 1, heading off to the Dodgers, where I just am okay with them taking 1. Yeah, shoot for 2, shoot for 3. But I said at the beginning of the week, if they took 2 games between the Yankees and the Dodgers, I'd be all right with it. I'd be 2-5. It wouldn't be pretty, but then that awful stretch is done. The gauntlet's done. And you would have been 7-12 in that gauntlet. Okay, not terrible. I'm not losing any sleep over it. Feel good about it. But today's game is exactly why, if you are that fan that keeps bouncing back and forth of this team's terrible, I'm not buying in, they frustrate me, you're missing games like this. Because a lot of us, through 70 games, have gone through the ups and downs. You go through the emotion, you go through the frustrations. It's human. But this team is starting to show that it's no fluke here. It's not. And I firmly believe the Royals are going to boost their bullpen. They are going to acquire guys to help them with a second half push. But to be 10 games over 500, 70 games into the season, they're going through a rough stretch. They're almost done with it. 1 more series, and they're done. They are done after that. And think about how you feel if you somehow take a series against the Dodgers when you're facing Yamamoto and you're facing Glass now. I mean, you're also throwing your 2 workhorses in Cole Reagans and Seth Lugo. But this comeback kids mantra, I know we throw it around a lot. I know we try to place it on a lot of teams, but the Royals this year kind of have earned it. And it's what makes a team, A, scary for teams looking at them in the playoffs, and B, easy to root for. It's what made everybody fall in love with the 2014 Royals. Of course, it was their story, being a tortured fan base, a tortured franchise for nearly 3 decades. And then here they go, just comeback after comeback, the wild card game. Like, they, in our minds, 14 and 15, those 2 teams are always going to be the comeback kids. But this team is writing a story of their own. And I'm not trying to put one game into, this pool of massive importance of, this specific game was everything. It was important, though. And I think you could tell when Matt Quatraro got ejected, which, by the way, was awesome. I've never seen Matt Quatraro that animated. We'll talk about him, throughout today's show. With him being that animated, you knew how big today's game was. And to blow that game and then walk with your tail between your legs to Hollywood, take on the Dodgers, you would have had a bad feeling in your stomach. That now you're just hoping to avoid another sweep against a really good Dodgers team. But Matt Quatraro wanted this one badly today. The players wanted this one badly today. And unlike previous teams before them, if they truly want to fight back, want something, they got the talent to do so. And they have guys step up when it mattered most. I mean, yeah, bullpen choked it away. Choked away a 2-0 lead. Lost the win for Alec Marsh. But they didn't hang their heads. and say, oh, woe is me. Yeah, it's just a bad stretch. I'm sure we'll bounce back eventually. They took matters into their own hands and walked it off down to their final strike in that inning. Isbel singles. Garcia goes up 2-0 in the count and rips a walk-off 2-run double, just feeding in to this comeback kids mantra. Now I can't wait for tomorrow night's game in which Cole Reagans is going to be starting against the Los Angeles Dodgers. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, Kyle Isbel, who I just talked about, is slowly heating up, and don't look now, he's hitting 230. And for a center fielder with that good of defense, it's more important than you think. We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. And we're going to start it off with PrizePicks. And with PrizePicks, you can turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your favorite sports this summer, and you can make a PrizePicks lineup in as little as 60 seconds. You need to just pick more or less on 2 to 6 players, stat projections, and you are locked in. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app, and with over 5 million active members, you can get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. The NBA Finals also mean more on PrizePicks, and so do the star players. You can get boosted payouts on select basketball stars that you won't find anywhere else. And also with baseball, this is a baseball podcast. It's underway. There's no better time to cash in on the action with PrizePicks. And you can add your favorite players from the diamond to your PrizePicks lineups all season long. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks lineup today. So here's what you need to do. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's Locked On MLB, LOCKEDON for a first deposit match of up to $100. Also want to let you know about Policygenius. And with Policygenius, they help you easily compare your options from America's top insurers in just a few clicks. Their award-winning agents can even walk you through the process step by step. Your work-life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. And even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over the other, so you can trust their guidance. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot from customers who have found the best fits for their needs. So here's what you need to do. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. And you can head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description we give you to give you your free life insurance quotes and see how much you can save. That is policygenius.com, POLICYGENIUS.com. Again, that is policygenius.com. Stop worrying about it. Let them just take care of you and figure it out if you're worried about any of that type of stuff. So Kyle Isbel today, a little bit of an unsung hero. And even last night, I thought he had a fantastic game at the plate, was really putting it together. Great at-bats. He's going the other way a little bit. The defense, of course, has always been stellar. But you don't look now. I mean, you don't just look at this game and go, wow, Kyle Isbel's looked great. Over the last week or so, Kyle Isbel's been a good piece to that lineup, a 9-hole hitter that you can count on from time to time. He had a big hit in the Seattle series. He had a big hit today against the New York Yankees. And from time to time, you know, he lays down the bunt with a runner at third. He can always seem to get him down. And he's also, you know, one of those tough SOBs playing with facial fractures, wearing that big mask on his face and continuing to swipe bases, dive for balls in the outfield. He is somebody, when it dwindles down to everything, is just a gamer. Like, you just strip everything away from the game, the score, who they're facing. He's just a gamer. And it's cool to see it slowly come around for him because he's hitting 230 now. And if I would have told you back in February, Kyle Isbel would be hitting 230 in mid-June, you already knew about the defense. If he could hit 230, all the better. You feel a ton better about what Kyle Isbel is doing. And that type of stuff is what can lead a average team, a good team, to becoming a very good team. And we saw Hunter Renfroe catch fire a little bit. We've seen Kyle Isbel now catch fire a little bit. All of a sudden, this outfield looks a little bit more playable. And they are getting hot at the perfect time because if they were struggling and the way that they were struggling back in April, in May, and the Royals were still going through this gauntlet, well, I got news for you. The Royals wouldn't have some of their wins that they have during this brutal stretch of play. But Kyle Isbel, to me, is a guy that has been through it, quite honestly. And, I understand that in baseball and sports in general, fan bases will pick kind of the whipping boy. They'll pick the guy that's struggling the most, the pitcher that's struggling the most, or just the guy that's really not playing well. And unless you're a Bobby Witt Jr. or really Cole Reagans, you're going to be open to some criticism. Like, to me, Bobby Witt Jr., and he even got criticism from time to time about not being clutch with the game on the line. And that just makes you chuckle a little bit. But a lot of these Royals players, especially the bottom of the order guys, they took the brunt of a lot of the criticism when the Royals lost. And right now, you can't turn to the bottom of the order and say they are the reason the Royals are losing games anymore. At least during this stretch, you can't say it. Kyle Isbel today, more so than Garcia's hit, had the best at-bat from a Royal in the series. I'm going to go as far to say in that series, that was the best at-bat I had seen from a Royal, and one of the better at-bats I have seen all season long. And I promise I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment. But in that spot, it's 0-2. You got a runner at first. It's MJ Melendez. He traded spots with Drew Waters, so you lose speed over there. Clay Holmes is on the mound. How many of you out there thought Kyle Isbel was going to keep the inning going? How many of you? It wasn't going to be a home run. Clay Holmes hasn't allowed a home run this season. So you're throwing 96, 97, 98 mile an hour sinkers, and Isbel spit on a few of the pitches. One of them did catch the zone, but completely missed the spot, which umpires few times are going to call that when you miss the spot by that much. He spits on 2 pitches at 98. And then he spits on a changeup that just dives away into the other batter's box. Was a good pitch, I thought, at least. No, I think Kyle Isbel last year, 2 years ago, or Kyle Isbel in April, he chases that pitch. And he either rolls it over to second base or he strikes out. But he gets into 3-2. And even then, I'm going, man, I just hope that he misses wide here. And you get it to Michael Garcia, runner in scoring position, maybe a gapper or a ball down the line scores Isbel as well. But he just ropes a pitch from Clay Holmes up the middle, and you get MJ Melendez to third base because he was running on the pitch. And that, to me, kind of goes back again to all these guys struggling when they go through bad stretches. And for the fan base, at times we think it's simple, right? Demote that guy, take him out of the lineup, look elsewhere. But the coaches know their players better. And sticking with them sometimes pays off. It doesn't always pay off. But think about the position the Royals are in now. They stuck with Hunter Renfroe for obvious reasons. He has a 2-year deal. They stuck with Hunter Renfroe. And by the way, we forgot to mention this in yesterday's episode. Not a fractured foot. So he's going to be back in half the time that he was going to miss. We could see Hunter Renfroe back in a week or two, which is fantastic news for the Royals. But they stuck with him. And we saw him become the second most valuable hitter in the month of May for the Royals, or at least since May 12th, because that's that measuring date that we always go back to, May 12th. But since that point, he'd been like the Royals' second most valuable hitter. And even if it's a month stretch or a 2-month stretch or a couple weeks stretch, it can steal you a few games. And in the end, that's incredibly important. Kyle Isbel, when he was slumping, the Royals did not knee-jerk to that and say, well, Drew Waters is hitting 330, so let's just swap him. No, they decided to stick with Kyle Isbel. And who knows if he can stay at 230. But right now, with Kyle Isbel being at 230, hitting 381 over his last 7, OBP north of 310 in his last 15, that's a Kyle Isbel that's very valuable to this team. Because the defense, you already knew that was going to be elite. He was going to be one of the better defensive center fielders in the game. You start to hit around 225, 230, that turns Kyle Isbel into a 2-WAR player or a 2.5-WAR player. And for a center fielder, you take that 9 times out of 10. You're not going to always have the superstar. But now it kind of raises the question of MJ Melendez. All right, so you stuck with Renfroe when it appeared to be a lost cause. Hunter Renfroe, before he fractures his foot, had an incredibly good 3 to 4 to 5 week stretch. Kyle Isbel, same thing's kind of happening. Does that stretch happen for MJ Melendez? Now they've got 2 guys in the outfield that are hitting pretty well. Or at least hopefully when Renfroe comes back, he can continue the trend. But, man, I feel better about some of these guys bouncing back. Garcia getting hot again. They need Salvi to get hot, but these guys hit their way out of slumps. And even the guys you're not expecting to, they are slowly hitting their way out of their slumps. Kyle Isbel deserves his flowers. He was one of the heroes of this huge win for the Royals and a series finale against the New York Yankees. All right, before our final segment, want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, we do have to talk about this bullpen. How long until the Royals actually go out there and bring in some reinforcements? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. We have a couple more sponsors that we want to let you know about. And the next one we want to talk about is our title sponsor in Tax Network USA. Here on Locked On Royals, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or the playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank account, even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let the licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Networks USA go to bat for you. With over 14 years of experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters that require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. You can see that link in the episode description below that we always post. Also want to talk a little bit about PXG Golf, our local sponsor here for Locked On Royals. I've gone back since and was able to check out some of the stuff they have over there. But if you're wanting to better your golf game, better really just everything about it, your swing, your long range, short range game, chipping, putting, driving, they've got this awesome golf simulator that can get a club fitted for you. And if this is your first episode, strongly recommend you going and checking them out. I had a driver that was fitted for me. I've never drove the ball so straight in my life. That golf simulator made me feel good. Hitting the ball hard, hitting the ball straight. A lot of us want to be able to do that as well. So they're going to do the same for you as they did for me at the Kansas City location. Visit pxg.com/lockedonroyals to schedule your fitting at PXG Kansas City, 7517 West 119th Street in Overland Park. Get fitted for any club and you'll get a dozen golf balls free. That's pxg.com/lockedonroyals to schedule your fitting. pxg.com/lockedonroyals. The limit is 1 dozen golf balls per person. This promotion ends on June 30th. The other terms and conditions may apply, but you can see their store for details. Well, I had an entire segment, really 2 segments planned out before the walk-off today. And it was going to center around the bullpen because I had seen so many comments after the 8th inning and really up until the Royals did walk it off about this bullpen, about the lack of caring and they actually aren't serious and they should be sellers. I understand the bullpen's been bad. It's been bad for quite some time now. I'm also not going to completely fault the bullpen today, and hear me out. John Schreiber wasn't great today. Gave up the home run to Anthony Rizzo, a slumping hitter at the moment. Then he gets a ground ball, 1 out. He gets another ground ball, error. Although they somehow ruled it a base hit. I don't know if the scorekeeper thought it was a bad hop. The replays did not really show me a bad hop. It was hit hard. It's a play you got to make. And even though Hampson recovered, that's a play Vinny Pasquantino's got to make as well on the throw to first base. So that happens. Then you've got the bloop into right field, first and third, the slow roller to third, run scores, tie game. Then you bring in Angel Serpa, Juan Soto. He's going to come through a lot of the time when he's facing guys that may not be as experienced in a moment like that, or you don't have the strikeout stuff as we've always talked about. Now, as much as I just defended the bullpen there, it is clear there are issues. And there are issues that need to be solved. But the good thing I can tell you here, I have 100% confidence they are going to make an effort to solve them. I do not see J.J. Piccolo looking at this group and saying they're going to just sort themselves out. He has been on multiple podcasts and had interviews, and he's talked with people in the media about the fact that they're going to be aggressive if there's a need to be aggressive on July 1st. And what that basically is meaning, if we are in the playoff hunt, which I fully expect them to be in at July 1st, they're going to try to upgrade that bullpen, and more specifically the back end of that bullpen, looking for guys that can get the swing and miss, looking for the guys that can get the strikeout. And that, to me, is what can transform this team. You know, we kind of fell for the eye candy with this Luis Robert talk, and he could be a potential fit, a potential piece. I'm not really focusing on that, and I don't really think the Royals need to go all in for some sort of everyday bat in the lineup. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. To me, it is all about the bullpen, because you can avoid blowups like they did today when you get the right pieces in that bullpen. I think there are 5 to 10 extra wins the Royals can have if they have a solidified bullpen in the second half of the season. They're going to be able to hang on to leads like they had in Cleveland. They're going to be able to hang on to leads like they did today. They're going to be able to hang on to leads like they did against San Diego, or they didn't do against San Diego. When you can get that swing and miss, you can get the high-powered stuff, and it's affordable. Those are all things that get me fired up and pumped up about this bullpen. Everybody knows it needs to be addressed. The Royals are also 40-30 through 70 games. They have a comfortable lead in the playoff picture. They are still chasing Cleveland, but Cleveland's got a gauntlet to go that begins here in July. You know, they're going to have quite the stretch. They get tough team after tough team after tough team, and if the Royals can take care of business, a lot of it's going to come down to that bullpen being steady. That bullpen holding on to a 2-run lead in the 8th inning. That bullpen holding on to a 3-run lead in the 9th inning. That is what is going to be the difference. And I fully believe that help is going to be on the way within the next month or so. I do not think the Royals are going to wait up until the trade deadline to make a move. In fact, I don't think they will even need to make a trade at the deadline, because they will have already made their trades leading up to it. Could always be wrong. This is just a hunch I have. There's been too much smoke about being aggressive, July 1st, this and that. The deadline is a month and a half away. I think the Royals are going to make moves to improve this bullpen by that point in time. They're going to have to. There's too many games in between then. And there are, I wouldn't say exterior factors to it, but why you're not seeing many deals is why you're not seeing a lot of deals in Major League Baseball. Those selling teams, the sellers, they may wait until teams get desperate, right? If the Royals called about Tanner Scott in Miami, maybe they're asking about, Blake Mitchell. We want Blake Mitchell in the deal. The Royals are going to go, hell no. We're not trading our number one prospect for a rental arm. But the later you get and the closer you get to the deadline, teams sometimes get desperate. I don't see the Royals getting desperate. I think they're going to find their matches, and I think they'll probably start happening at some point at the end of June and early July. I just think that's a prime time to start making some moves. And the Royals are going to need some bullpen help, and it's very clear after today they need it sooner rather than later, because this offense is top 10 in a lot of categories. They can steal a lot of extra games if they can get that bullpen help on the way, and I think it's going to be coming sooner rather than later. All right, that is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Tomorrow, it's going to be a Mailbag Friday. Already got tons of questions flowing in. I'm sure everybody now is feeling better about those questions following that wild walk-off win. So Mailbag Friday coming to you tomorrow. Until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.